What's up, everybody? It is Jimmy Smith along with Ryan Moody, our MMA show. So, for those of you that may not know, we've been doing this podcast for a while. It's done well. We really appreciate all the listeners. And we're transferring the content partly over to YouTube at the end of the month. So, you'll be able to listen to our podcast and then see it on YouTube a couple days later. So, you have it for your car. You have it in two formats. Anyway, so we're doing a little preview of that, because we happen to, in the midst of our preparation for UFC Fight Night 162, some big news dropped. Nate Diaz today announced, I believe first on his Instagram or his Twitter, that he has popped for some kind of PED that he did not name. He did not say it was cannabis, so I don't think it's cannabis. Elevated levels is what he called it. And he said, I'm not going to keep this secret. I am paraphrasing, of course. I'm not going to stay quiet like a lot of people do. I'm not a cheater. I am not fighting. I'm not showing up to fight night until this is dealt with. So we have some breaking news we're going to talk about for a little bit. And this will be kind of our preview of our podcast on YouTube, because we have a news item to speak of. And to say it is depressing for fight fans to have Nate Diaz go out, possibly, we don't know yet, still fight week, things can happen, is incredibly upsetting to everyone involved. People thought maybe the MMA gods would strike us down, and so far, it looks like they have.
Well, we knew it was going to happen, right? We knew at some point, one day you pay. One day you pay. We found out.
Too good to be true. Too good to be true.
All right, it's not over yet, Jimmy. So let's take a couple things into context here. First of all, you're absolutely right. I loved that Nate came out and owned it. No secrets, I guess, to a degree. Basically said, listen, I don't eat meat. I have, it's a tainted supplement fail from what I read. He talked about, only eating at Whole Foods, which he's been a big advocate of, taking natural supplements. He basically said, listen, I'm not about my legacy. I'm not about getting paid. Basically what he's done his whole career. I'm here to fight or I don't care. And that's where he is. So there's a whole lot of dynamic things that can happen. And one of the interesting things we have to recall, John Jones, going through a similar issue in nature, without knowing exactly what these are failed tests for. It's really hard to kind of compartmentalize them. You have the ability for this to go to another state, right? Like this could go back to California. And granted, MSG is a huge show. They've been promoting this 500th show randomly, all of a sudden out of nowhere the last 2 weeks. So they've made this a bigger and bigger deal. And then naturally we've got this, if you don't listen to the podcast, I've mentioned this horrible idea to modernize MMA with a fake belt that is going to be, the BMF belt that no one really cares about, in my opinion. But this does throw a wrench in a lot of plans, including Conor McGregor. So I guess let's go through this step by step. Number one, why don't they just get somebody else to come in and take his place? Leon Edwards, for example. I've heard Cowboy Cerrone's name, which made me cringe just because I know how fast that fight would end. Is there anyone that you want to see step into this event now that, knowing we're never going to get back what it was, would you like to see someone else save this event, if you will?
I would like to. The major issue with this, the underlying issue, is there's no other Nate Diaz. Right? This isn't just two good lightweights going at it. I mean, the top 15 at lightweight right now is packed full of murderers. But that's not what this is. This was the BMF belt. Now, you can disparage the belt all you want, but the concept of the two baddest, realest guys, that's what it was about. And there is no other Nate Diaz. That's the killer here. If this had been Masvidal Edwards, okay, great fight. Really love to see it. Leon Edwards goes out a week before for the same reason. There are other lightweights that could step in. Would you be disappointed? Yes. The concept of this fight was very, very unique. And unfortunately, it hinged on these two guys meeting up. And could we save the fight, air quotes? Yes. We could bring in another lightweight, another welterweight, whatever. You probably have to bring a lightweight at this point just because it's a tough cut if you weren't ready for it. But it wouldn't be Diaz. And so how do you fill those shoes? How do you remake The Godfather without Marlon Brando? It's that kind of thing. That was what we wanted. We wanted Nate and we wanted Masvidal, and that was it. Nothing else would do. These were the BMFs. Another warm body, I think, just doesn't do it.
You know what else you have to consider is this is a pay-per-view. And they had propped this up on that belt an awful lot. There's no other title on the line. Do you think this is a scenario which we've, I believe, only seen once in the past, where we have to revert away from a pay-per-view where Kevin Gastelum and Darren Till probably ain't going to sell it, where, you know, unless somebody does step in or unless you have a title fight that you can move around, which I don't see that.
I don't see any, no.
I don't know if you can keep it as a... I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if they can keep this as a pay-per-view at this point.
Yeah, without Nate, it's going to be tough. Without a standout lightweight, I mean, even if somebody comes in, obviously, the one thing you talk about is Cowboy Cerrone, but got to remember, Cowboy Cerrone might be next up for Conor McGregor. He's not necessarily inclined to take this fight when he has Conor McGregor, perhaps, in the wings in January. If anyone would, it would be Cowboy. Right? But Cowboy already took on Masvidal. Masvidal beat him. It would be fun. It wouldn't be a pay-per-view main event anymore. No way. The only hope I have is we're still a week out. Right? We're still a week out. Maybe this whole tainted supplements thing could get taken care of by then. Maybe he brings them whatever supplements he was taking. Okay, here's what it was. No harm, no foul, and we're good. Maybe we can solve it in a week. That's the only thing I can think of, because once Nate is officially out, he is not fighting. I don't see any good replacements. I don't see how it stays a pay-per-view. Yeah, it just screws this card up so badly. I don't know if it's repairable. You, as you said, might have to step down.
And Nate's always been really hard in his stance. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, he's not one to back down. So I don't even know if he lets them save it after this tarnishing, if you will. Looking ahead, you've got UFC 245 that's relatively stacked. You've got, you know, Amanda Nunes, Durandame, Holloway Volkanovski, Usman Covington. I don't think that you could not pull a title fight 2 months plus away to save this card. That's not possible. You've overstacked that card, but at the same time, you've really underlined this one with that BMF belt, and now that it's gone, it's going to really be interesting to see if this thing doesn't just end up on, you know, ESPN.
You know, the interesting thing that might get, I don't want to say exposed, but that might be a factor here is Nate says and kind of implies, he says it, okay, in his tweet, and I'm quoting here, "I'm not going to play their game and try to hide it or keep quiet as they suggested. I'm not going to have my name tainted as a cheater like these other MFers who keep quiet until the fight just so they can get paid." He's saying the UFC told him not to say anything. That's interesting because we've heard a lot of tests that were done before a fight, and then afterward we find out they were doping, and we go, hey, you know, if you pissed hot a week before, why are we finding it out after the fight, after everybody gets paid? Now, when he says keep quiet, it could have been, look, we're still looking into this. There's a process here, and we don't want you jumping the gun. And Nate went F you and jumped the gun. It could be, as comparatively innocuous as that. Like, okay, it could be a tainted supplement. Give us a second to look at it. All right? Like the picogram incident with John Jones. Okay, yeah, it's in, but there's a reason. We're good. We can get past this. And he went F you and jumped the gun. So, but there's that little bit of the behind the scenes process of how they deal with these tests, who gets outed, who doesn't get outed, when is it made public, and when is it not made public. A little bit of that is getting peeled back in this post by Nate Diaz, just because that's how Diaz rolls. I'm not keeping quiet. Well, the implication is what he's saying is they told me to keep quiet. Well, was it in a more innocuous way of like, look, we need to go through the process, or was it, hey, hush this up and you can fight and then we'll deal with it? We don't know, but that's an interesting thing too. I think that's going to come out, and a lot of people are talking about it.
You're painting Nate as quite the wordsmith, if that's the case. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you read it as I'm not going to have my name tainted as a cheater like those others, then yes, you're absolutely going right back to Brock Lesnar, right back to the Mark Hunt issue where, you're letting people fight when perhaps they shouldn't have been based on pre-screen drug test, which we find out in those cases is, right before the fight. And as fans, we've always said, well, why would they fight if they knew they failed the drug test? And then, like you said, I mean, a lot of times, as the fan side of this conversation, when I hear someone cheats, I go back and I look, and it's just a label that they wear. So he has never had that label. I would hate to see it placed on him, but if he's coming out this way, benefit of the doubt to me always comes to the first to speak, and this is him speaking. But it is very complex, and although I would love to believe that, I just don't think a iPhone post made at 2:34 in the afternoon is going to be that crafted with punctuation and capitalization errors.
Yeah, there were a lot of errors when I was reading it. I did Sirius XM today. It broke while I was on air, and I the last 20 minutes of the show were devoted to it. But yeah, it was hard to read because he made a lot of grammatical errors. But that idea, they wanted me to keep quiet, and I won it. Diaz just doesn't play by everybody's rules. But do you give UFC the benefit of the doubt, thinking, well, they have to go through a certain process for anything like this, and they just said, hey, look, keep quiet while we go through the process. Or once again, it was, look, keep quiet, fight, and then we'll deal with it afterward. We don't know which one that is. And so that's an interesting thing that lid might pop off. We'll see, because Diaz has no problem outing everybody about everything. But, we have, all I can say is we still have time that this might be worked out.
Well, that is something that remains to be seen. Listen, we appreciate you guys supporting Jimmy's YouTube. For those that came over and went to the podcast, we even more, in my case, appreciate you guys supporting that. And we are really glad to kind of bring these two endeavors together. So any feedback you have, other than can the guy that's not Jimmy stop talking, which I'm sure I'll get anyway, any feedback you want to leave, we are more than open to. Just when news breaks, I think we might be able to sneak on here for 10 or 15 minutes every so often, especially, this is a major story, and I know that you guys want to hear Jimmy's perspective, so we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you get that as soon as possible on his own content page. Appreciate you guys listening to this, and we will be back very shortly with more commentary, and as he said, please do make sure that you go check out the podcast. I know Jimmy will put a link down in the description if he hasn't already. Do make sure that you go check out the podcast. I know